You're listening to the Home Staging Show podcast, and this is Season 2, Episode 9. This is your host, Cindy Lin. Hi guys! Hello from Napa Valley. I'm in Napa this week for our second annual retreat for stagers who are in the advanced level of their businesses, and we're having a really great time learning from experts and each other, and frankly, my mind is just blown. I'm just exploding with ideas and more ideas about how to improve our home staging business. I'm getting a lot of ideas from other stagers and a lot of feedback, so I think it's going to be awesome next year. I think most Californians who are listening to the show will also agree that the rain yesterday was amazing. I feel like it's been years since I've heard a thunderstorm. As you may know, that we have had a serious drought going on in California, so we're super excited to see some rain. If you have been listening to the show for a while now and like the show, please take a minute to rate and review the Home Staging Show on iTunes. That would be incredibly helpful because that will help other people to find the show and allow me to keep finding great guests and keep recording. Today's show is brought to you by EcoJoe, the eco-friendly St. Joseph statue home styling kit. In real estate, there's a tradition of praying to St. Joseph for good luck, and we made an eco-friendly statue made with clay. EcoJoe is 100% natural, he won't harm the earth. To find out more about EcoJoe, visit ecojoekits.com. EcoJoekits.com. Today's episode for me is a very special one. I interview Angie Roberts, who's one of our students and a home seller from our home staging course, Stage Your House Like a Pro. This course has just been a long time coming. I've had the idea of doing a course like this for several years now. And it was really a dream come true that we were able to launch it this September. And Angie was one of the first students that are in the program, and she has given us a lot of great feedback. So I'm very excited to see that she's finally put her house on the market after she finished her staging. She has successfully staged her own home, and I invited her on a show so she can share her experiences about how she pulled the house together, the challenges she had faced, and what was her process like staging her home. I also didn't realize that Angie had rehab homes in the past, so it was really interesting to listen to her perspective about getting her home ready for sale, and the investment she had put in and the work they had done themselves. I especially love what she has shared about the pricing differences before and after staging and going through it with their real estate agent. I always think this type of interviews are very valuable, especially if you're a home seller who is going to put your house on the market in the near future. I think it's super incredibly helpful to hear others' experiences and learn from them. So without further ado, let's start the show. Actually, you're one of my first students for the course, and it's always so excited to see you in our Facebook group, and I love the way you contribute things, and I'm so excited too when you posted your photos for your new listing. That's really, really cool.
Thank you. We are excited too.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background? Like, what do you do and what made you decide to sell your house, that kind of stuff?
Sure. I'm a writer and a graphic designer. I've done that for 27 years now. And I currently work at Purdue University in research communications. So my job is to promote the research that our faculty members are doing on campus. Like we have several faculty members right now that are working on Mars rover projects for the next Mars rover that goes up in 2020. So it's really, really exciting.
That is really exciting. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I have two kids. I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, and they were very central to our decision to sell our house, which I'll get into in a minute. We also have two cats and two dogs, and they actually also played a role in this because the house that we're moving out of doesn't have a really good area for a fenced-in yard, and we just adopted a second dog this spring, and we really wanted a place for her to run around with her big brother. Yeah. I've been married 25 years, and my husband and I have rehabbed three different houses. We did that in the first 22 years of our marriage, but then in 2012, we retired from that and bought a new house. So you're probably wondering, if we retired from that and bought a new house, why would we be leaving a new house? So we had found this house when we wanted to move to the Lafayette area, but at the time we didn't know where our kids would go to high school. They were both, one was in a parochial school and one was in a public charter school that didn't have geographic boundaries. And so we decided on the house because we love the house, we love the neighborhood. We'd actually watched the house for 3 years before we were ready to move, and it languished on the market that whole time. And then about the time we were ready to move, they got it relisted with a new realtor and we just jumped on it. So fast forward to 2015, our daughter was starting high school. She's very active in theater, and our son had decided to join robotics this year.
Hmm.
So we just knew we were going to be running back and forth a lot, and we literally lived a half an hour from the high school.
Oh, okay.
And when we started thinking about the kids staying there till like 9 o'clock at night, several nights a week, it just was not practical to think about having to drive that far. So we stumbled upon a spec home in the West Lafayette area, much closer to the school, and it was almost finished. And it wasn't a matter of negotiating, to wait a few months until we were ready to move. We just needed to jump on it. And so we did.
That's very cool. Robotics sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it does. I don't understand a whole lot of it, but I'm sure it's really cool.
I remember in high school, and I went to see one of those robotics competition where they like kill each other with robotics. That was pretty awesome.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't know if my son has to do any killing with his robots. I
Well, I'm
haven't
sure killing
checked
is
on
probably
that.
overstating, but it's just a bunch of like nerds or geeks like getting together and then like kind of just play with their robots. I thought that was very very cool. I'm
Yeah.
a bit of a kind of nerdy girl myself, so that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And then so you mentioned that you're located in Lafayette. What state are you in?
We're in the state of Indiana.
Cool. And then can you tell us a little bit about your local real estate market?
Yeah, we're actually in a Twin City kind of situation because the Wabash River divides Lafayette and West Lafayette. And we tend to say Lafayette here. I try to say Lafayette, but it never comes out that way.
That's funny.
Anyway, the house we just moved out of is on the south side of Lafayette, and it's really an up and coming area. It's got a lot of new residential areas, a lot of amenities and restaurants and stores, but the college is on the other side of the river. So when you get closer to Purdue University, which is where we have moved, we're like 5 minutes away now from campus. It's a very, very hot real estate market. And
Mm.
one thing we found out from our realtor when we started shopping for a new home this fall is that very few people take contingency offers. And we
Mm.
were really shocked about that because when we bought our house in 2012, it was a foreclosure. And so, of course, the bank would not consider a contingency because they could have had somebody else come along any day and say they would just buy it outright. So we kind of knew that was a special situation, but we didn't realize that the rest of the market just didn't do contingencies as a rule.
I see.
So that makes it kind of interesting. And another thing is because of the proximity to Purdue with West Lafayette, some houses get snatched up in really choice neighborhoods.
Right.
They'll be sold in like 3 days.
Whoa. That's awesome though.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Now, the house we're selling isn't in one of those neighborhoods, but it's still a very popular place to live because it's kind of a sanctuary away from the city.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. My uncle went to Purdue and he still went back to visit from time to time.
Really? What did he study there? Do you know?
Well, he is a professor about for like pharmacy medicine in
Yeah,
UCSF here,
yeah.
so that's probably where what he studied. I don't know what his exact degree was. So,
Okay, cool, cool.
yeah, very
Yeah, we have a
awesome.
very good pharmacy program here.
Yeah, I've heard about it. A lot actually, because he had a lab and everything. And when we first moved to California, we stayed at my uncle's house. That's how usually people are, right?
Oh,
Like when you move to
okay.
a new place. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
very cool. And how did you find your realtor?
Well, when we bought our house in 2012, when we started looking, I got on Facebook and asked my Facebook friends if they could recommend somebody. And several people recommended the same realtor, and she instantly found me on Facebook and sent me a friend request.
Oh,
And
awesome.
I just really like that. She's super friendly. She uses social media a lot to promote her homes. She's not one to have billboards around town. She doesn't place a lot of ads. She basically does a lot of business networking and uses social media, and I like that approach. And so we had a really good experience with her buying our house. And so we decided she was the perfect person to help us buy a new house and to sell the one she helped us buy.
That's really cool. I
Yeah.
really like that story. I think that's better than, I don't know, I guess because I'm single, so I have a lot of dating analogy, but I think it's like it's better than like, meet someone through friends that you already know that this person is legitimate versus like you just meet like a random person by like,
Right. Right.
like meeting at a bar versus like, for realtors, like you call them at an office or you saw a
Mhm.
sign, that kind of thing. So that's really
Exactly.
great. So it sounds like you have a really good experience with her.
Yes, she's warm and friendly and she's super positive. And it's kind of funny because since we follow each other on Facebook, I know things going on with her grandchildren and her
Wow, okay.
daughter, and then she knows things going on in my family too. And so it gives us like a different level of a relationship. We're still very businessy, but it's kind of like a friendly business like.
That's really cool. I think that's a really good way to do Facebook because I'm always hesitant of adding clients on Facebook because I was kind of like, well, I don't really know. I don't know. Some of the things might not be appropriate, especially like if you have friends who post things that are inappropriate. I don't have friends like that, luckily.
Right. I
My
don't either.
my personal life is very revolve around my dog. We have a corgi, so the things people post on my page are just like other corgis. So like, or Game of
Yeah.
Thrones when Game of Thrones is on. So like, yeah, but it's always kind of like interesting, especially like now we're heading toward election season. It's always a little bit scared. I'm always a little bit scared when like client try to friend me. I'm like, not I discuss it publicly, but sometimes I don't really. Sometimes there's things that I don't really want to know about people. People tend to overshare on Facebook as well, so it's kind of an
Um,
interesting line to walk.
I agree. And occasionally one of my Facebook friends will, post something kind of TMI, too much information. And I just tend to ignore that and kind of move on. I try not to respond to it because then I'm kind of giving attention to it.
Mm,
And so that's kind of how I avoid it.
that's awesome. So I know you and your husband have been rehabbing homes. Can you tell me a little bit more
Mhm.
about that?
Oh, yeah. We have done anything from refinishing floors to knocking down walls, putting up new walls, mudding the walls, painting them, hiring people to re roof. My husband knows how to do electrical work and
Mm,
plumbing. My dad's a retired electrical engineer, and I had an uncle who was a licensed electrician, and they actually did all the electricity on our first house that we rehabbed, but they taught my husband how to do everything. So then he started doing it himself.
mm.
And then when we were rehabbing our third house, he hired a guy that lived in our neighborhood to help him replumb it. And the guy taught him how to use Sapex plumbing.
Mm.
So he's done more of like the harder, more intricate handyman stuff, but I have done things like refinishing floors. We've both been on our hands and knees for like hours every day, refinishing floors and doing things like that. And we just got burned out on it. It was really fun when we were first married. It was fun to buy a house and to be able to go in and
Yeah.
visualize it being different. But after we had kids, we our attention turned to other things and we just didn't have the energy anymore to do that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think once you have kids and pets too. I mean, also like when
Yes.
you're because I when I was in high school, my parents remodeled our home, and we all
Mhm.
live in the basement, for like a long time, kind of like half of a year, like all of us
Yeah.
down there. I mean, we kind of have fond memories looking back because it was kind of like, I mean, yeah, but at the time it was kind of miserable because you're just like all crammed in the basement. So I mean you have two dogs and two cats.
Yeah.
That would be a lot, I think, to deal with.
It is. It is a lot. And it's funny because our kids kind of grew up in a house that it took us 10 years to rehab. And
Mm.
so it was kind of normal for them for a long time. And it was funny because when we first went through the house that we live in now, the one we just bought, it was still under construction, but almost done. And I heard the kids, when they walked upstairs, they started talking about knocking out walls to make rooms bigger. And I turned to the realtor and I said, how many teenagers do you know that go through houses and start talking about knocking out walls? But it's just what they know.
Yeah.
It's just normal to them.
It's actually, I think that's a really good skill to have because I mean it's very applicable once they grow up because you can really do
Mm-hmm.
a lot like when you know how to make that. I mean, I always joke that I do staging only. So it's kind of like I only do Botox for houses. I leave the nose job to other people because I don't
Right.
I get well, I can tell you like I think this wall should be knocked down, but I don't have the engineering experience. Like I will have to hire an architect to come in to do that. And most of the time it's too
Uh-huh.
expensive for homeowners to do.
Right. Right.
But versus for you guys, you already know how to do that, and or like a lot of my investor clients where they already have the skills to do that and have the resources for it, we would recommend it. But for most homeowners, it's a really tough sell just because there's so much more. They're just not equipped for it.
Right. Right.
And then
Exactly.
what's the most difficult part for you when you're rehabbing homes?
Sorry.
It's okay.
My son keeps calling me. He doesn't know that I'm on an interview.
It's all right.
Um, Yeah, the most difficult thing is finding the money to do it all.
Hmm.
For instance, the first two houses that we rehabbed, we bought low and we sold high. And
Mm.
so when we chose our third house, we chose it not because we really liked the house so much, but we loved the location. It was out in the country and it was near a walking trail that I used all the time. And it was right around the corner from a tiny little neighborhood. And we knew what the neighbors' houses were worth. And so we thought, well, what it was like the neighborhood fixer upper. So we thought, well, we'll just buy that and then we can fix it up. But at that time, we had two toddlers. And so it was really hard to find the time to do that.
Mm.
And then when the housing crisis started, we tried to get some loans to get some work done on our house, even just to buy materials or to hire somebody to put in carpet. And we got to a point where the equity in our home dropped like $30,000 in a single year because of the
Wow.
housing crisis. And so we just literally we couldn't get a loan. We couldn't
Wow.
get one. And so we just had to kind of stick it out for several years. And I think that's what made us decide we just couldn't do it anymore because every other time that we had bought, it was a sure thing that we could sell and make a lot of money off of it. And this time we just kind of broke even. And
Mm.
so, yeah, that was really tough. Now, I don't think it's like that in the housing market today, but we learned from that experience that buying the neighborhood fixer upper is kind of a gamble, depending on what happens with the housing market.
It is. It is kind of a gamble, especially there's so many complications that could happen.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I watched some of those HTV shows. I think was it like Flip or Flop? They basically are buying houses sight unseen just based on like an auction website. And I found that incredibly
Yeah.
risky because you don't know what you're buying into. And they show it on the show too. It's like they show up and there's like all these extra surprises. And it's interesting they always over remodel on those shows. I always wonder how they like I because I know it's a show, right? So they usually edit a lot of stuff out. So I
Hmm.
kind of wonder what the realistic picture was actually like. But yeah, it definitely is a lot of
Right.
risk.
Yeah, when we remodeled our last house, we had intended to get a new kitchen put in, and we went and talked to Home Depot. We chose the cabinets and the countertops and everything we wanted. And then we started looking at our budget and realized that there were some exterior things that really needed to be done to our house and
Mm.
that we really just couldn't justify the cost. So we ended up painting the kitchen cabinets. And I think we did a really good job with it. I know they always say, don't do that because it's an amateur kind of thing. But we were really kind of like high-end amateurs at remodeling. And so I
Yeah,
think we did a good job. And actually, as it turns out, it probably was okay that we didn't put a whole lot of money into that kitchen because I'm not sure we would have gotten the return on investment.
I see. Yeah, return on investment is so big. I mean, that's one of the things
Mm-hmm.
I keep talking about in the course. It's like
Right.
you really have to evaluate, are you going to get the money back on, you know, what you're investing your money in? Or is it like,
Exactly.
because I think emotional ROI is great, but at the end of the time, at the end of the day, if you're putting your house on the market, you still have to see that money return because ultimately
Right.
you are, I mean, you are make these are kind of monetary consequences that you have to deal with. So, yeah.
Right. Right.
And did you stage your previous rehab homes?
We didn't. The first two houses we sold, staging didn't even exist or it just wasn't heard of in our
Yeah.
market.
Hmm.
When I'm sorry, that was my daughter calling now.
Oh, it's okay.
Um, they're so they really want to talk to their mom, I guess, which is why I'm trying to do this at work instead of at home. Anyway, the when we sold our last house, we sold it in 2013, and it took my husband 6 months after we moved out to finish all the remodeling on it. And by then, we had established our lives up here. We had moved all the furniture, and it just wasn't practical to stage it. We got really lucky. We sold it in a couple of weeks.
Mm,
And my husband had done a really great job, but literally all that was left in there was, the curtains. There was nothing else.
that's awesome, though. I mean,
Yeah,
it's good. I mean, also, like, staging is so, I think, new in a lot of markets.
right,
So, how
right.
did you find out about staging?
I actually found out about it in the early 2000s when I did freelance writing for a magazine called Indianapolis Monthly Home.
Hmm.
Before I worked at Purdue, I spent 10 years as a freelance writer so I could be home with my children when they were little. And I heard about this magazine that was getting started in Indy. And I found out the editor's name and I just emailed her and I said, would you be interested in having me write for you? And I'd only done maybe two home interior articles up until then, but I sent her what I'd done and she liked it. And so the very first article she had me write was about staging.
Mm.
And that was about the time that HGTV started doing staging shows. We had the housing bubble. Everyone was excited about flipping houses. And so I wrote for this magazine for several years. I wrote probably about 50 articles for them. And so I not only learned about staging and restyling, but I also got to tour some really high end homes in Indianapolis. I toured some kind of indie celebrity homes,
Mm.
interviewed two different governors' wives during that time
That's pretty awesome.
about renovations to the governor's mansion. So I picked up a lot of information that would help me with staging.
That's very cool. And so, for this
Yeah.
particular house, is that why you decided to stage your own house?
Yeah, I felt like I knew a lot about it, not only from my experiences in writing for this magazine, but also because of my graphic design work. I work with colors every day in my job,
Mm.
and when I do layout, I have to think about scale. Like when you design something on like a print spread or even a website, you have to think about how the photos support the text and
Yeah.
how everything comes together visually. And so it's really not unlike how to put together a room in a house.
I love that you
And
say
so I
that.
felt like I
Mhm.
had a lot of the skill sets.
Yeah. No, I love that you
Thank
say
you.
that because I feel like if you know how to style in one area in your life, you can actually take that skill and translate to everything in
Mm-hmm.
your life. That's why on
Right.
one of the podcasts I interview a fashion stylist because I feel like, it's the same, it's similar thing, like how you put color and patterns together. And yeah, so that's awesome.
Yeah, I really love that podcast because she started talking about your colors.
Hmm.
And my mom had that Color Me Beautiful book back in the 80s. And so we all, my sisters and I all read it, and we all figured out like are the colors that we look good in. And I still use that today.
I know we laugh. I mean, they make fun of it, but I mean, it's still very applicable. So
Absolutely. I completely agree with everything they say about coloring.
that's awesome. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
Rain. She was so good and she has such a great energy. I think that's really actually really good if you're working with someone one on one. Is that you really need to be able to like them. Kind of like your realtor too. It's like if you enjoy working with them, that's going to make your business relationship so much better.
Absolutely. It's all about making an emotional connection
So when
with your
it
customer.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I feel like I do business better with people that I have an emotional connection with. And so I also tried to apply that to staging my home.
That's very cool. And I love what you said about in the group as well. Like you really thought about your buyers. So when you,
Yeah.
yeah, so how did you approach staging your home this time?
Well, I should probably, I mentioned before that the house had sat on the market for 3 years. And so I was thinking about when my husband and I went through the house back in 2012 with the realtor, and we're wandering around and we're like, well, what is this room for? And what is that room for? And would that be the breakfast nook or is that the home office? And we were honestly really confused.
Mm,
And I started thinking about that when I was thinking about staging my home. And I thought, I've really got to spell it out for people. That's
right.
exactly why I need to keep the furniture. So that was one key decision that I made early on, was that I needed to make sure it was furnished. And so the other thing I was thinking about was, I thought, well, maybe I'll just take some photos. We'll stage the house and then we'll take photos and then we'll move out. But then again, I thought people kind of go through it and then they won't understand what the room's for. Plus, they won't have an emotional connection to it, I don't think, as well without the furnishings.
Yeah.
So that's why I decided to furnish it. So then the other thing I did was I was taking your course while I was painting all these rooms in my house, and I was thinking about the demographics. And before I worked at Purdue and before I was a freelance writer long ago, back in the 90s, I worked in healthcare marketing. And I had to do demographic analysis as part of my job.
Hmm.
And I even had a job once where we used this database. It was called Inforum. And they actually segmented neighborhoods and
Yeah.
they would give
Uh-huh.
them names.
I've seen
And
those.
like,
Yeah. Hmm.
right, like Red, White, and Blues was like a neighborhood where they were like all American, like industrial people that worked in factories, things like that.
Mm.
And so I kind of knew about that. And so when you were talking in your online course one time about psychographic analysis, I thought, well, I understand that. I understood what you meant. And at one point you said you need to really think about who your customer is and maybe even come up with names for them.
I know.
So I was driving home from work one night. I mean, literally, I just had no time because I was either at work or I was trying to paint my house and get it staged. So I was driving home from work and I thought, okay, well, who's my demographic? And so all of a sudden in my head, I thought, well, it's Stan and Stacy. And I thought, well, Purdue has a really big engineering program. And so I'm just going to make Stan an engineer. And because I live on the south side where we have a lot of factories like Alcoa, I thought, well, he'll just be an engineer that works for one of the local factories.
Hmm.
And then I thought, well, often I hear stories about people saying, well, I graduated from this high school, so I want my kids to graduate from my high school too. And so I thought, well, we'll make Stacy an elementary school teacher, but she actually graduated from the high school that's in the school district where our house is located. And so she wants her kids to go to that school. So it kind of snowballed from there. But I also thought, because we don't have the way our house is situated on the lot, there's really no good place to put in a fenced in yard. The house was built the old fashioned way where they put the garages on the back. So you drive down our boulevard and you see these beautiful vintage looking homes. We
Mm.
have kind of a Tudor style exterior, but most of the homes on our boulevard are bungalows, and they have a very similar look to the ones like the Craftsman bungalows from the 20s, and all the garages are on the back. So there's really not a good place to put a yard. So I thought probably we wouldn't have somebody with really little kids moving in. And because we have more than 2,500 square feet, it didn't really seem like a starter home where a young married couple would move in before they had kids. So I was taking all that into consideration. So one of the things I learned from your course was that if you have dual income couples, they need a home office. And my husband actually had a home office, but it was literally right off the front door. And I thought, well, that's taking up valuable real estate space and that we could use for a living area. So my husband and I decided we put the office upstairs in the loft. And then I was also thinking about, whenever I go to Michael's and Hobby Lobby, I see women my age with teenage daughters doing crafts. And I thought, I had this little space under the stairs, kind of like Harry Potter, where he used to live under the
Yeah.
stairs. And we had created a craft room out of it. And when we toured the house, the realtor said, oh, well, this would be a great place for you to store suitcases or extra dishes or whatever. And when I saw it, I thought, this is a perfect place for a craft room for my daughter and me. So I thought, and considering that a lot of people my age in this market do crafts, I thought I need to keep that as a craft room. So those were some of the things I thought about. So Stacy needed a craft room, Stan and Stacy needed a house. And then the other thing I was thinking about was this idea of the emotional response. And that was something I also learned from you. When I used to watch the staging shows on HGTV, they would talk about, well, we need to, repurpose this room, or we're going to recover this sofa, or, stuff the sofa with more stuffing so that it looks nicer. But it was really more about decluttering and depersonalizing. But when you started talking about your retail styling experiences, like with Pottery Barn and Anthropology, that really struck a chord with me, because I tend to study the Pottery Barn catalogs like somebody's going to quiz me on them. And when I do, I'm like obsessed with them. And when I walk through the store, I literally take my phone with me, and I very surreptitiously take pictures of how they've laid out their tables and things like that. I really studied that. So I knew what you meant about trying to evoke this lifestyle. And I thought that's what was missing from some of those earlier TV shows I watched. So I knew that there were things I needed to do in terms of like props to add back into the rooms after I decluttered them, in order to evoke that emotional response.
Yeah. I mean, Pottery Barn is master at it. Their catalogs sell, like, they're $1 billion company. So they obviously know what they're doing. And one of the things too is, like, when you're on set, they're doing all these things. I mean, it's really to layer. I mean, they have all these little details and stuff. Obviously, they're selling merchandise, but they also want to create this lifestyle that you buy in. And same thing where in the store, where they obviously they're selling everything on the table, right? Like all this decorative stuff, but they are building an ambiance, like, like what would your dream dinner party gonna be like for this Easter or for Christmas or Thanksgiving? And that's why everything they do is very, very well thought out, and there's a very clear branding instruction. It's because ultimately they know what sell and what works. And so I think as consumers, we can really take a page out of that. Especially too, like, that was one of the things too, like, it's important to stay on trend. And that's why I think it's really great that you do go through the catalog that are in season right now, because every store is going to be different. Like Pottery Barn in Birmingham, I'm sorry, Birmingham is one of the suburb area. Like San Francisco, for example, it's going to be styled a little bit different than somebody in Ohio, for example, because local
Absolutely.
preferences are different. And same thing with